I reckon it must be about 4 years ago now I'd have been sat in those chairs. 3 years? Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So my name's John. I work at Unilever as assistant brand manager on Marmite and Bovril, and as I said a short while ago I was actually a student here at the University of Chichester. I want to start with a quick question. It's all studying brand management here. What do you think is the oldest brand in the world not named after its founder? Anyone has to guess?
Graham's probably worked with them.
Thank you. It's got to be a Unilever brand, doesn't it, I guess?
That's correct.
Marmite.
No, Bovril's actually the second oldest. Sunlight Soap is the oldest, which is as in
Port Sunlight from
Port Sunlight, Lever Brothers, Unilever. So
How old is that?
131 years. So there's older brands in the world, but they were all named after the founder in some form or other. So Bovril is one of the original brands that wasn't named after the founder, and Sunlight Soap was the first. So I just wanted to take you through a quick intro, a few personal points, and then my personal journey and a little bit about personal branding and building yourself up for a reputation within industry, but also understanding kind of a little bit. I think it's important to understand how you build a CV and how you actually create yourself into a really employable person, because marketing is not just about marketing the product you're selling, but it's about marketing yourself. And then also putting some theory into practice on brand management and telling you about some work I've actually been doing and actually been able to apply a lot of what I've learned. And I've had a really fascinating challenge on one of my brands, and actually also talk a few examples outside of that. So I think one of the most important things to understand when you're managing a brand and when you're managing yourself and becoming something within work is to know your environment, know who you're against, but also really truly understand yourself and work hard on that person that you are. So one of my favourite quotes from Emmitt Smith, the American football player: all men are created equal, some work harder in pre-season. So it doesn't matter whether you're talking about creating a new marketing campaign, launching a new product, walking into a job interview. You've got to do the work beforehand to understand what you are doing and to understand who you are, who you're against, and what you're trying to achieve. And on that, to where when I came to finishing being sat in your seats, I graduated. I was this guy riding behind this little diploma there, really happy. Had an amazing time. I've got a great degree. I came out of here with a first, and that's only 2 months. I came out top of my class as well. So I did okay. And I'd also had a real practical background in business. One of the things I'd always been able to apply is I'd worked in restaurants for a number of years. I used to play semi-pro rugby. I really had got to grips with understanding how a business operates on a small scale. And it's actually what had led me to a business degree at Chichester, was wanting to really formalise that learning and actually take it, understand it in a much deeper than just running a restaurant as I had done. However, and this is one thing I'd really strongly advise you if you get the opportunity to do while you're here, what I will, looking back, take as a learning was I'd actually got no marketing experience. I mean, I've marketed a restaurant on the local level, but I had not gone and done any internships. I'd not gone and got any work within it. I'd not taken a placement year or anything like that. So I actually came out of here wanting to pursue a career in marketing and having had some amazingly engaging marketing lecturers who had really got me to have a passion about the subject, but I actually knew nothing in practicality about it. I knew all of this theory, and I'd had some great practical examples given to me within it, but I knew nothing about actually going out there and doing it and actually applying that theory. So I'd strongly advise you get the opportunity, do it, really. And whilst an undergraduate degree for me had provided a great certain depth of knowledge, I had no real depth within that particular subject, partly because I didn't have the practical application, partly because there's only so much that you can teach when you're part of a wider business degree, and I'd not studied marketing as a specialism, I'd done business. So what I went away and did, I went away and got a master's. So talking about building up your own brand, I went and said, okay, what do I need to do? What's going to improve my brand to make me more employable? I went and looked through what master's courses were available and ended up deciding to go to King's College, which is one of the oldest, most reputable universities in the UK, based in London, which gives you the opportunity to network and the opportunity for internships to work, etc., to meet people. So, another one of my favourite quotes, sleep faster I would recommend. I know that's hard to swallow as a university student, you like to sleep, but as Arnold Schwarzenegger put it, this is where it comes from, there's 24 hours in the day, if you sleep for 6 of them, you've got 18 hours to get some stuff done. And that was really what I applied at when I went and did my master's. Now, there's great opportunity out there in the world, but you've got to, I had, because I'd done that previous career, I also had some catching up to do. But I was doing my academic, I was studying very hard. I mean, I did read the books while I was here, but not as in-depth as I probably read them when I was at Masters. I read every single article that I had to do, I read every single book, and actually that does improve your knowledge hugely, so probably don't do what I did at undergraduate and try and skim through. Do read that. And especially as I actually had to go, whereas I don't know what the model's like now, I mean, it was a lot of practical coursework when I was here. I don't know how many exams you have. What I had in my master's was I also had to study for exams as well as doing coursework, as well as working with people, which, by the way, even when you're doing a master's, perhaps even more so when you're doing a master's at a college like King's College, you get a lot of people who are actually slacking off. You'd think you go to King's College, you're not going to get that. There are a lot of people who had a little bit of this coming from their family who thought, I'm just here to enjoy the London life. So it actually teaches you a lot about trying to manage people when you want to be engaged with delivering something, because not everyone's necessarily got the same priorities as you have. So remember that. And get them to have a reason to buy into your journey and to what you want to achieve. And it's a big skill. You're always going to be working with people. So learn it. Understand them and get to know them. And then on the other side of things, I took that opportunity. So I was also working at the same time for Ask Italian in restaurants still, but I took that opportunity to get some real practical marketing experience. I did a 2-week internship with Harlequins Rugby Club, which was fascinating, having, I don't know if there's any rugby fans in the room, but Chris Robshaw, Joe Marler, Danny Kerr walking through. Pretty cool. But that actually gave me a little bit of project management experience and actually focusing on some of it. I was given 2 very specific projects and to deliver within a 2-week time period, so a lot of ensuring I did it. Did actually some digital work for King's College London. Now, you need to have digital skills if you want to go into marketing, probably in any form of business actually right now, is an understanding of digital. So that was great. And actually that also gave me an understanding of looking at different. So my master's degree was international marketing, and so there was elements of learning cultural within that, and one of that was actually that project I did for King's College. It was looking at how can market better to the Turkish market, and working actually with the Turkish students. So trying to understand different mindsets again, and building your own knowledge and your own skill to work with other people from different backgrounds, because again, you're going to be working in an international world. And then finally, I also did a 3-month project for Ask Italian. And I always say that delivered great results, but the best thing I did in that was get the people who were managing their restaurants to talk to each other. Because people, one thing I learned there, these all put things on my CV, but it was also helping other people. It's one thing you learn is that actually a lot of people, if you get them to talk to each other, have surprising amounts of ideas and knowledge that they really just want to share with you, and they really just want to share with each other. So all of that, and then also did some networking while I was there, and also had some fun and drunk and enjoyed London and went to the various clubs, and never forget to do that because it's important to have fun. And so it's surprising how many, and also what I found in big business, it's surprising how open senior managers are after they've had a couple of glasses of wine. But I'll wait. So then having taken all that, I finally was actually employable apparently to a little startup called Coca Runners, By the way, if you ever need a great chocolate gift, look it up. It's amazing chocolate, artisan chocolate. But from all over the globe, amazing stories. And actually, one of the most important things behind branding, I find, is to have a great story that people can buy into. And all of these bars and brands have great stories. So, point about that though, tiniest of tiny, 6 people in the office, less than 1 year old, turnover of maybe £250,000. It's a real challenge there. You've got to actually be able to multi-skill. You're not necessarily going. There's a good chance you're going to end up in a big office to a degree, but if you want to go into a startup as well, one thing I'd advise, and I know a lot of people may want to go into startups, is be willing to pitch in everywhere and be willing to multitask and be willing to listen. I was very fortunate. I had the 2 founders both had 20 plus years in business. One of them had run Amazon in the Far East, translated Monopoly into Japanese for random, which is fascinating to speak a lot of languages. But learn and listen, and that really helped hone my commercial background, which you find actually, like marketing, there's huge amounts of creative stuff, and if you go agency side, it's mainly creative. But if you're going to go client side, like I ended up going, you've really got to have a little bit of commercial knowledge about you as well, a little bit of, you're going to hate me saying it, but you've got to be able to deal with numbers. And then went from there to the world's 3rd biggest consumer goods manufacturer, 173,000 people, 130 plus years old, 40 plus billion pounds of turnover every year, massive company. Again, dealing with people is important and understanding different cultures and people's different ways of working. And actually for me, that's been one of, even though I say that throughout that, dealing with people within such a matrix organisation has been one of the hardest learnings for me. But all of these things have added something to my brand. So one of the great things I took from working in Coca Runners and all those relatively smaller companies, that I have personally a reputation within Unilever, is that I have an entrepreneurial reputation. I will find ways to get, without breaking the law or without doing anything that's going to harm anyone, get things done as quickly as possible so we deliver much faster and we think in different ways. So the great thing that you guys can probably bring to a company the size of Unilever or anyone is actually the ability to think differently, because you're from a different generation to probably a lot of the people you're going to be there, so bring that different edge as well. But it's throughout that, I've had to, at each stage, what is these going to add to my CV? What's that going to be for my next position? And then always thought, actually, take a few chances along the way, but always thought, what's the next step, and how's this chance going to add in? So actually when I joined Unilever, I joined on an 8-week contract, which is pretty scary when, even though I was on an internship at Coca Runners, I would have been kept on as long as they needed me, so I could have been unemployed after 8 weeks. It happens that I had enough confidence in myself and I had enough skill, obviously, to be kept on for 2 and a bit years later. So have a bit of confidence, but understand. But anyway, the point why I took that 8 weeks, I didn't expect to last beyond 8 weeks, was Unilever on my CV, the skills of working for Unilever on my CV. I'd find something after that. I knew where I was going, my environment, what I was taking from that environment would be huge amounts of employability from Unilever. And I mean, they kept me on, but if they hadn't, I'd have found something, and I knew it. I just had that because I understood the company I was going to and I understood what I was getting in my CV. So my key takeaways there are: understand people, understand your environment, understand yourself, and understand what you're doing, what you're doing brings to you as a brand and to your employability, to your skill set. What are you going to learn? One of the questions I always ask in interviews is, what sort of training have you got for me? What sort of progression opportunities? Where do you see this person? Where do you see the person who gets this role going? And what are you going to help to develop them into that? And then also read the job spec. What's it going to give you? And read about the company. What's having that company on your CV going to give you? What's having that? When you pick your modules, what's actually having that module on your CV going to give you when you go into an interview for your next role? So always think about building yourself up within that. Now, on to the stuff you actually want to study, but putting theory into practice on brand management. I've had a fascinating challenge looking after Bovril and looking after Marmite. So Bovril was created in 1886. Actually, well, Bovril the brand was created in 1886. The product has existed since 1871. Sold by a Scottish butcher living in Canada to the French army. So a bit of a product of the British Empire and really rooted in Britain. And the thing I always like to... So I don't know if anyone here knows who Sun Microsystems are. Anyone? Sun Microsystems.
I know the name.
Know the name. Well, do you know who resides in their old offices now? Facebook. So Facebook, this one thing Mark Zuckerberg's done, and I find this quite inspiring, though, is he's kept the Sun Microsystems sign on the back of the Facebook sign. And the reason for this, Sun Microsystems used to be a huge computer company. It's gone now, long gone. The reason he's done that is to remind them, as big as Facebook are, as huge as Facebook are, it's a reminder to him every day that it doesn't matter how big you are, you can fail, you can fall, and he doesn't want that to be, that Sun Microsystems sign to be a Facebook sign in some years to come. So for me, that's why I've always put this up. This is actually a sign in Brixton. A worn away old sign in Brixton. My responsibility, so one of the things I take personally when I'm working on a brand, is I'm responsible for that brand. And so I don't want to be the guardian of that brand. So as a brand manager, you are the guardian of that brand. Or you should be if you're doing your job right. I don't want it to die on my watch. It's a relatively small brand in the world now, with a huge history. I want to give it a life for another 130 years. It's actually, academically, it's shown as a study in building a brand, historically. There's a great line that the founder came up with there. You say your brand's indispensable and irreplaceable. The journalist asked him. He said, well, how did generations survive before you created your brand? Quick as a dash, he went, what do you mean? They didn't, they're all dead. It actually has he was a quiet character, teetotaler in the 1880s and 1890s. But it was built on patriotism, it was built on being in the right place, the right time. It actually had a sign on Piccadilly Circus before Coke. It was there in the spot where Coke is before Coke. Built on a USP, it had more protein in it than all its competitors, or as it called its sustenance. It highlighted its quality ingredients. Ironically, for something that built on patriotism, saying British is the backbone, it also highlighted that it was made with the finest Argentinian beef. Work that one out. And it also used endorsers of the time. So it used relevant endorsers. It was endorsed by Ernest Shackleton, it was endorsed by munitions workers, it was endorsed by people who were relevant to its audience. So it's also the sorts of ways you can actually build a brand through that you'd recognise today, in not necessarily exactly the same form, but they will have morphed into something very similar. So my challenge was actually I inherited this brand without the brand platform, as you'd call it, or as we call it, brand love key in Unilever. So everyone there were a few people around the office who kind of knew what the brand was about, and might have worked on it in the past. It only briefly had a brand manager for 6 months before I inherited it. Before that, it had been split across a number of portfolios and just picked up by people here and there, so it had rather been forgotten. So actually the reason why I brought this brand up today is because it's actually a great way it's become a great challenge for me of using all the stuff I learned within my brand management lectures, my marketing lectures, etc. Is how do you use, so you don't actually use you don't even use a SWOT analysis as something that you'd actually write down, but it's all of these concepts that you will learn within your lectures are great ways of thinking about how your brand operates and how you work. You shouldn't need to write them down. I mean, they're tools if you want to use them to write them down, but for me it's a way of thinking. So what I always say is that any models you're learning, any concepts you're learning, you're using them as a lens to deliver what you need to. So for me, the feeding into that lens was researching the consumers to actually understand. So one of the most important things, going back to the personal branding thing, understanding your environment, understanding who your buyers are, who your non-buyers are, who's actually interested in your product, why are they interested in your product, what do they think of your product. So it actually doesn't matter what you think, well, it does matter what you think, but it matters much more what the people who are buying your product or the potential buyers of your product are, or your brand, and what actually they can tell you what you can and can't do. Speak to the people who've worked on it previously, speak to people who've touched it, understand them. I had a couple of very experienced marketeers, and actually great to learn from them. And then look at the old advertising. That'll tell you a huge amount about what your brand stands for, what your brand's done in the past. So I know that Boville's got a really, as a brand, if you portray it in marketing, has got a really British sense of humour. You can't see it on here, but that's a little girl, unfortunately you can't see the line, but a little girl facing the bull and going, I think I prefer you as Bovril. So it's a little bit about that British bravery. So I use various concepts as a lens in my mind to actually deliver who is the brand Bovril. So what can that brand do? What is it? What does it stand for? And how do we go forward from here? So what does that allow me to do? So who I am tells me what I can do. What are my limitations? It's the other thing with the personal brand. There's things that I know as a person I can't do, right? There's jobs that I know that I couldn't learn the skills to do them because they're not within my. Even if I was to stretch myself beyond them, and I always love to go into something that will stretch me, I couldn't learn them. So again, there's certain things that, like a person, a brand, just can't do, or at least in its current environment can't do. So, just as an example, I like an idea that has rattled around occasionally. You see this. There's a great article in when Pret brought out bone broth. Said it's just posh Bovril. And I actually dug around on social media, and there's quite a few tweets and Instagrams and various of saying actually, I think that's Bone and I can't remember who that is, but anyway, both the Pret and various and Helms and all other things saying it's just posh Bovril. So actually, is that a light bulb idea? Can I do that? Does that actually fit within my brand? Is that something I can do to reinvent my brand? So that's one way of looking at it. But another, my other arm that I work, there's other things that I can do, there's other ideas, understanding that Bovril's about beef, it's about meats. That tells me I probably couldn't do a vegetarian Bovril, but I could do is there pies I could do, or something like that. Or working with Marmite, what can Marmite deliver when it actually has more of a transcendent branding? And actually the problem with Marmite is people have forgotten about the product. They actually remember the brand, not the product. They love it or hate it. I think people associate that tagline with people, and actually one of the biggest challenges when you're talking about Marmite is to get people to remember to pick up the product and not just love the idea of the brand. And also who my consumer is, plus who I am, is where I can be relevant. So I'm definitely relevant here at football. A lot of people, particularly up north, drink a Bovril at the football and have a pie with it. Hence saying that maybe a pie can work. But can I reinvent myself? Because you've always got to be reinventing yourself. That's the other thing I've always tried to do as I've been evolving. It's to reinvent and involve yourself, to be relevant. Can I actually deliver a bone broth, really? I'm using this as a line through it, but will that actually be relevant to the next generation of my consumers? But I also need to know that I need to be relevant to another generation. I need to. And actually on this, someone actually came up with a quote when I floated this idea, and they said, well, all you really need is to find that the founder had a nice beard, and you could say that I was drinking bone broth before it was cool, and appealed to the hipsters in East London. And actually, you could get a quite cool advertising if he had a beard. Unfortunately, the pictures I found when he didn't have a nice beard. But, not the point. So, that's the one thing though as well. Pulling for me is the thing you really have to, and this is why I was talking so much about connecting with the consumers, doing the research, understanding people around it. Me, it's not this guy. And all of you are probably going to end up in reasonably well-paying jobs. You're all going to have a decently, I don't know any of your backgrounds, but you're all probably going to end up in a way somewhere where you are middle class or better. That means you're not necessarily the person who's consuming your product. There was a great story, someone was meeting with an agency the other day, and he was talking, he said he presented to Nestle. the idea he was presenting had been brought into beautifully by the brand manager, and then they'd gone to the marketing director, who was quite obviously very, very well off, come from quite a wealthy background, and gone, well, none of those, he was something about marketing and salons, and he was like, well, none of those salons were particularly nice, and some of these were actually Tony Guy salons and things, so you'd probably pay quite a bit of money. And he said, well, he turns around and he goes, well, are you really, if I'm going into a really beautiful salon, am I really going to want an 80p bottle of water? Let's be honest, then you've got to think about who your actual consumer and who you're marketing to. Now, you might want to, in your marketing, convey a message of who your consumer wants to be. In fact, you should. You provide an aspirational message often within your marketing, how your consumer perceives themselves. But it's important to remember who your consumer is and where your consumer is. So there's no point there's probably no point advertising Bovril in the Vegan Society to use a very extreme example of it, but or no point advertising an E-Class Mercedes at to someone who's on benefits. It's understand actually who's going to be able to buy your product and who's going to want to buy your product and why. Never forget that. I think that for me is it's the biggest pitfall that people fall into, and I find that within Unilever. We've got lovely offices in Leatherhead and in even more beautiful office in central London, and people often forget that they're not marketing to themselves. They're not marketing to someone within the London bubble. They might be marketing someone up north who's got an awful lot less money than them, or alternatively they might actually be marketing someone who's got a lot more money than them. Either way, don't market yourself.